I'm thrilled to be here, and it's been very interesting listening to my two other panelists because I agree with everything they're saying, and I'm here taking another angle at a number of the points that they've made. Another angle at the structural crisis, another angle at innovation and entrepreneurship. I'm here to talk about the power of public-private partnerships, particularly when they're led by social entrepreneurs. The current economic climate has government cutting funds for critical social services, corporations cutting non-essential spending and laying people off, growing the unemployment rolls, traditional nonprofits that relied on philanthropic donations going bankrupt and ending their contributions to the ongoing health and well-being of the communities where they've operated. Jobs, health services, special education, vocational training, environmental protection initiatives, enrichment activities in public schools, assistance for the elderly. All of these things are being cut, and the needs keep growing. So the question is, what's the answer? Again, that structural crisis that's approaching us. And I would argue that the answer is public-private partnerships, developed by entrepreneurs with a business model that draws from all the sources of resources in society and brings about a model that can pursue shared goals. This is only possible if the public-private partnership is structured in such a way that each stakeholder is being asked to contribute resources, either in cash or in kind, that they can afford, and if their role in the public-private partnership allows each actor to fully operate on its own best interest and in contributing to solving shared social problems. My perspective and my comments today come from my experience having worked for each of the major stakeholders in society: government, business, universities, nonprofits, foundations, and citizen sector organizations. You should see my resume. And also having created 3 public-private partnerships, one of which I just had the pleasure of celebrating its 20th anniversary with. So I'd like to tell you the story of that public-private partnership briefly to illustrate my point, the World Trade Center Institute in Maryland. In the late 80s, the governor of Maryland wanted to increase trade in the Port of Baltimore. So he put up seed capital and state funds, and he convened a board of trustees for a new 501c3 nonprofit, created to harness all the stakeholders with the power to achieve this goal. The corporate leadership, the exporters, the service sector firm leadership that depended on economic growth, the president of the major university that had international as a key component of its curriculum, the University of Maryland, the president of the leading community development foundation, state cabinet secretaries of economic development, transportation, and education, and the leadership in the shipping industry corporations. That group, once convened, appointed an executive director, which was me. I was told that what I needed to do was match with in-kind or in-cash resources the state seed capital within 1 year, while simultaneously meeting the goals of increasing international trade and reverse investment for Maryland. I needed to figure it out, develop the program, get the cash in the door, and not screw up. I was 28 and stupid enough to take the challenge on, and succeeded, actually, but succeeded because I tapped into all the sources of resources in society. I did the first thing that I could think of, which was to go out to the sources of resources and say, what would have enough value to you for me to be able to create to meet your needs so that I could then sell it to you and make the money that I need to have a viable organization? And they told me. Corporations wanted to learn from each other about how to get into foreign markets, and they wanted to collaborate on that. I went to the university and I said, what do you need to give me what I want, which is free printing and free space? What they wanted was visibility with corporations. I went to the government entities and said, what do you want? What is valuable to you? They wanted the credit, which I gave to them, and they also wanted tax revenues. What I got in response was free office space, mailing lists that were shared, and all sorts of other things. So I built a business around harnessing and sharing foreign market knowledge, creating opportunities for marketing and collaboration for businesses. But I did so by combining in-cash and in-kind resources that enabled me to meet my goal. And a year later, I had met the seed capital infusion. And here we are 20 years later, and the organization is going strong. This is just one example of many where social entrepreneurs identify a social need and then go about creating a business model that draws on the understanding of the market drivers so that they can tap into the sources of resources to get the job done in such a way that all the actors are operating in their own best interest when they contribute resources, only they're contributing them to a shared goal. Often, in these models, in-kind resources are more important than cash. I think we can all agree that the world's problems are outstripping our current initiatives to solve them, but not necessarily our current capacity to solve them. We have a structural problem going on, and that's what I'd like to talk about. The roles of the different stakeholders and how they should play them in society need to be updated. And we need to break down the silos that the resources are residing in, because currently you've got all of these silos of resources pursuing their own initiatives, not sharing information with each other, not operating collaboratively, and there is huge waste and inefficiency as a result of this. Government. The role of government that is often looked, it's often looked to play is to kind of solve all the problems for everyone. That's never worked, and it's certainly not about to start working now. I would argue that the revised role that government should be playing and can be playing in effectively sponsoring public-private partnerships is the one like I just described. It's being a catalyst. It's being a convener, it's being a partner, and it's being a spark. Corporations. Traditionally, corporations have operated as though they were somehow islands, and the environment was somebody else's problem, and the healthcare was somebody else's problem, and the education was somebody else's problem. And increasingly, I think what's happening is that corporations are realizing that it's their problem. Actually, it's very good business to invest in the sustainability of the environments where they have their facilities, where their employees live, their customers live, and their suppliers operate. Universities used to have a role, or see themselves, and some still do, unfortunately, but it's changing, of educating the best on higher order thinking. Increasingly, universities are having a massive and critical role in becoming engines of economic development in states. They're partnering with corporations and government to educate to market needs. They're commercializing learning where possible, and they're partnering. And it's very, very exciting to work with universities in creating these public-private partnerships. Citizen advocacy groups like environmental conservation groups are finding that rather than taking so strong and hard a position that they do nothing but fight with everybody, it's better, actually, and the best way to move the ball down the field is to collaborate and coordinate. The public-private partnership I created in the state of New Jersey targeted regulatory reform as a key goal for economic development. And the way we brought that about was to put the environmentalists, the corporations, the state and local regulators in the same room and have everyone come up with a middle ground solution that they could all live with. Nonprofits that have been created on charity-based models are inherently unstable, and in environments like this, they go under, and there have been lots of them going under, which we all are aware of. They're unsustainable because they rely on charity, and charity comes and goes depending upon the sources of charity, and it also means that the entities are not market-based, because they are not looking to market forces to fund them. This leads to bureaucracy and inefficiency and waste. The social enterprises that I am championing, which are public-private partnerships based on market models, are particularly effective in tough economic environments like this. They tap into market resources by understanding the agendas of their stakeholders and by creating win-win situations for everyone involved. Social enterprises are created by social entrepreneurs. There are a number of them that you'll be hearing from tomorrow in a panel, and that there are a number of others who you've probably already heard from. It's very important to understand that the social entrepreneurs that you're hearing so much about, that you'll be meeting here and that I'm talking about now, they're all people who have multiple master's degrees, PhDs, have had incredibly successful careers, and have been barreling along with their profession, and have either come upon some dislocation in the market that they decided they wanted to address to solve a social problem, or have had something hit them personally that has meant that they just became passionate about solving a social problem, and they had a particular set of expertise that they were able to use in doing so. Ashoka, the organization I work for, has been supporting social entrepreneurs for nearly 30 years now. We're in 70 countries and have a network of 2,500 of them. 130 of them are in the United States. About a few of them, so that I can give you a couple of illustrations of what I mean. The two women are here for gender equity. I'm not going to tell their stories. You're going to hear them tomorrow, but they're huge superstars, and you have that to look forward to. I'll talk about Eric Dawson, Tim Carpenter, and Steve Biggery very quickly to give you an idea of what I mean when I say a social entrepreneur creates a public-private partnership. Eric Dawson grew up in a very tough neighborhood in Chicago and realized that a critical barrier to succeeding in school as well as later in life was not being able to deal with violence and was being violent yourself. So he's developed a curriculum for peaceful conflict negotiation that is in all of the schools in Boston, Los Angeles, and in New York. It has had absolutely terrific results in bringing about increased grades, decreased violence in schools, and has been supported very strongly by government that wants its educational facilities to be more effective. Test scores have gone up, grades have gone up, enrollment has gone up, and attendance has gone up. It's been supported by corporations that want their employees' children to have better experiences in the local schools and that want their future employees to have better educational attainment coming out of them. Tim Carpenter wanted to create facilities which would enable the elderly to, once they went into elderly housing, continue to make a contribution in society. And he's done so very successfully throughout California by partnering with developers who want the tax credits that come from having this kind of programming in their facilities. The developers fund what he's doing. Universities and nonprofits bring pro bono programming in for the elderly. University students volunteer and assist in that way. And government assists by giving tax credits. He's put together a model that's very successful and is growing rapidly, is fully funded by tapping in, again, to all the sources of resources. Finally, Steve Biggery, just one more example of many. He owned a number of McDonald's franchises, and he also invented the ability that all of us enjoy, which is being able to speak into that box, and then you drive up to the window and you get your Big Mac. And he, in having all of these facilities, realized that his employees were so close to the edge at all times that something like their car breaking down and not being able to afford to fix it would mean that they would lose their job because they'd missed so many days of work. He has created a national safety net for the working poor that is funded by the corporations that employ the working poor. The revenues have gone up in the corporations, turnover and absenteeism has gone way down, and all sorts of families are now able to get through rough patches that they weren't able to survive before. Social services organizations through government and nonprofits have partnered with him to create this safety net, and it's really an astonishing accomplishment. So, what is a social entrepreneur? Essentially, they're a very rare being which sees solutions instead of problems. And they create self-sustaining business models, and they are interested in changing systems and in fixing problems, not in creating institutions. How is what they do relevant to the economy? Well, I would argue that it represents a more efficient utilization of society's resources. It is the answer to this structural disconnect that we've been discussing. And the number of jobs in the citizen sector and in this social entrepreneurship arena are growing at 3 times the rate as those in the traditional sectors of the economy. So there's something going on here that's very important to pay attention to. I would argue this is the growth area of the economy to come. What's in it for corporations to support these initiatives? What's in it for universities and governments? I would argue it's the most cost-effective and highly leveraged way to invest in the ongoing sustainability and health of our communities. For corporations, it's doing that where their employees live, where their facilities are, and where their customers are. It's a lot cheaper to support a social entrepreneur or multiple social entrepreneurs that are fixing the problems in society through public-private partnerships than it is to try and do it yourself, or than it is to try and do it through supporting the federal government, as you've been hearing from the previous 2 speakers. Corporate challenges in pursuing this kind of an approach are important to understand because it means taking a longer-term view of return on investment. It means changing the boardroom perception, and it means changing the shareholder perception of what's important to focus on. But I think that there's enough momentum and enough understanding of the importance of this that it's possible. Challenges faced by social entrepreneurs are the same faced by any entrepreneur, and they all represent areas where you can make a difference. All stakeholders in society can make a difference. How can you contribute, and what can you do? How can you get involved? Well, I would argue that one thing you should think about doing is becoming a social entrepreneur. Another thing you should think about doing is supporting a social entrepreneur. But entrepreneurs are kind of our Olympic athletes, our social entrepreneurs, and we can't all be that way. But what we must all be is change makers. With the rate of change increasing exponentially, it means that the communities of tomorrow that are going to be the most successful are going to be those that have the highest concentration of change makers in them. Individuals who've mastered the key skills of leadership, teamwork, and empathy, and who feel empowered and responsible for stopping and fixing problems they see in society instead of walking by them. So you could use your influence to encourage entrepreneurial social solutions in your communities. You could empower youth to see themselves as change makers. And ultimately, you can invest in the goal of an everyone a change maker world by becoming one yourself. Thank you.